Okay, now we want to talk about what sedimentary rocks tell about their history. So if you're out in the field and you find a sedimentary rock, what's it trying to tell you? Well, one, it's going to tell you the environment in which that sedimentary rock formed. Another thing it's going to be telling you is how long has that particular rock been in that environment, or how far has it traveled in that environment. So let's first start with a river environment. So in a river environment, you tend to find fairly large chunks of rock that are glued together, because the larger the pieces of rock, the heavier they are, the harder they are to move. So the very finest pieces of rock can make it all the way to the ocean, but the heavier pieces of rock tend to remain in the river channel. Okay, now let's say that you found rounded pieces of rock that have been glued together. Well, that means that those pebbles have been in the river for quite some time, so that they could have gotten rounded because they're bumping into things. Okay, on the other hand, if you find chunks of rock that are angular in a river, then that means that they haven't been there for very long, or they haven't been transported very far, so that they're very close to the source rock where they came from. Okay, the picture next to it is of a cave. So in a cave you tend to find travertine. So if you find some travertine, that means that travertine either came from a cave or it came from something like a hot spring, for example. Okay, the one that's next to it is going to be a swamp. So you tend to find peat and coal in a swamp. So if you do find those sedimentary rocks, it's telling you something about where it came from. Also, if you find peat, then that means it wasn't in that environment for very long. Because if it was in that environment for a longer period of time, the peat would have turned into coal. Okay, the one that's next to it is going to be glaciers. And so glaciers leave signs such as rocks that have been scratched, because as the rock has gone over bedrock, it gets scratched as it's caught up underneath the glacier. Another thing is that you get a jumble of different kinds of rocks put together, and then they're all embedded in the glacier, but then as soon as the glacier begins to melt, all of those rocks basically are dropped where they were. Okay, the one that's next to it on the bottom row is an ocean environment. So that if you find limestone, then that's telling you at one time there were oceans there. The one next to it, okay, if you find lots of gypsum, or if you find lots of rock salt, that's telling you that that environment was an ocean that evaporated. Okay, next to it is going to be beach sand, and then next to it is going to be desert sand. And we said that you could tell the difference between them by, with the desert sand, the grains are going to be pitted. They're going to be frosted as a result of the grains hitting each other in the air. Okay, so that if you do find a sedimentary rock, it's going to tell you something about how long it took to make that rock, and it's also going to tell you what environment did it form in. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about the kinds of features that can be made by sedimentary rocks.